Part 1. The Breaking Point from Tales from the Terran Republic. No more cares to spare? Shelleron is not your typical Terran Republic officer. She's a hybrid part Zool, part human who stands out both for her appearance and her compassion. Her cyan skin, bioluminescent freckles, and quiet voice make her visually unique. But it's her relentless kindness that truly defines her role aboard the TRV Resolute, a diplomatic and humanitarian vessel of the Terran Republic. She serves as the ship's xenocultural liaison, a position that demands cultural understanding, emotional strength, and the ability to empathize even when it's undeserved. Over the years, Shelleron has developed a reputation for being the heart of the Resolute. She helps refugees, heals the wounded, and comforts the grieving no matter their species, history, or actions. But every act of compassion chips away at her emotional reserves. And the Republic, without realizing it, keeps sending her into increasingly dark places, expecting her to make the difference that no warship ever could. The Resolute's next mission takes them to the Farron debris cluster, a region occupied by the remnants of the Farron species. Once proud and technologically advanced, the Farrons had fallen after losing control of their artificial intelligences in a rebellion that destroyed most of their civilization. Now scattered across broken space stations and hollowed-out asteroids, they live in isolation and despair. They have rejected outside aid, preferring to die out with what dignity they have left. The Republic, concerned about the surviving Farron youth and the increasing reports of self-harm and starvation, sends in the Resolute as a last effort. No warships, no soldiers, just negotiators and medics. And she spends 8 harrowing days among the Farrons. They don't welcome her. In fact, they hate her presence. The elders see her as an outsider trying to erase their suffering. One of their priests even spits in her face, accusing her of attempting to steal their shame by bringing mercy where they believe punishment is deserved. Still, Shelleron persists. She cooks meals with limited supplies, delivers medicine to those who won't say thank you, and offers gentle words to children whose parents have already given up on life. Her efforts go mostly unacknowledged. It's even worse, they're actively resisted. Despite everything, she refuses to abandon the mission or her ideals. The emotional climax comes when a Farron youth, maybe 13 standard years old, tries to kill himself. By opening a pressure door, Shelleron physically tackles him and seals the hatch, injuring herself in the process. She receives no thanks. The elders barely comment. There's no relief or reflection from the Farrons, just silence. As if her efforts meant nothing, when the Resolute finally departs, the captain tries to debrief her. But Shelleron just nods and says nothing. There's no tearful breakdown, no angry outburst. Just a heavy silence, because something inside her is gone. The empathy she once gave so freely has been drained past the point of recovery. For the first time in her service to the Republic, Shelleron feels ... hollow. She doesn't regret helping the youth. She doesn't regret the meals or the medicine, but she realizes something devastating, no matter how much she gives. There will always be places in the galaxy that consume and never give back. Part 1 is called The Breaking Point for good reason. It's the mission that pushes Shelleron past her emotional limits, not because of violence, but because of futility. She didn't witness atrocities on the scale of genocide here. She wasn't under fire or taken hostage. Instead, she drowned in silence and rejection. And that's more dangerous than any battlefield. This chapter sets the tone for the entire story. It's not about a moment of explosive rage or tragedy. It's about the slow burn of exhaustion, the erosion of compassion by the endless grind of indifference. Shelleron's care, once seemingly limitless, is finally starting to run dry. When someone like her reaches the edge, the galaxy should worry, because when the most compassionate soul stops caring, what's left behind isn't evil. It's cold, calculated clarity. Part 2. The galaxy asks again from Tales from the Terran Republic. No more cares to spare. After the emotional drain of the Farron mission, Shelleron returns to the TRV Resolute, a changed person. She doesn't speak much, no longer engages in her usual calming rituals like meditation or drinking her favorite herbal tea. Her vibrant personality, once warm and emotionally available, has faded into silence. The crew notices her withdrawal, especially Lieutenant Kara's, the ship's second in command. He's one of the few people close enough to pick up on her subtle changes. To him, it's like watching a candle burn out slowly, but the galaxy doesn't give time to heal before Shelleron can process what she's endured. The Resolute is rerouted to the Ashari conflict zone, a volatile region where a civil war has erupted. The Ashari species is splitting apart. Two major factions each claim to be the rightful rulers of the Ashari government, and neither is backing down. Cities are burning, food is scarce, and civilians are being killed in the crossfire. The Republic refuses to intervene militarily, but it does dispatch the Resolute to serve as a neutral party to negotiate a ceasefire and evacuate non-combatants caught in the chaos. This mission is far more dangerous than the Farron. While that was a slow emotional bleed, this is an active war zone. Civilians are fleeing burning homes, armed factions are suspicious of outsiders, and trust is non-existent. Yet the Republic believes that people like Shelleron, diplomats and empathetic liaisons, can make a difference. Once again, Shelleron joins the ground team. She translates, negotiates, and speaks to families whose homes have been bombed, trying to get them to safety. But unlike before, she isn't soft. She isn't patient. She does her job mechanically efficient, cold, and direct. Her voice is still calm, but there's no warmth in it. The turning point in this chapter comes during an evacuation effort. Shelleron and her team are escorting a group of refugees when an Ashari officer from one of the warring factions confronts them. The officer accuses the refugees of being sympathizers of the enemy faction and draws a weapon, threatening to execute the entire family, parents, children, and elders alike. This is where the old Shelleron might have begged, reasoned, or offered herself in exchange for their safety. But not now. Shelleron steps between the officer and the family without hesitation. She doesn't plead. She doesn't negotiate. She just stares. It's a cold, empty look, a silent dare. The officer falters. It's not because Shelleron is physically imposing. She isn't. But in that moment, the look in her eyes communicates something far more powerful. I no longer care what happens to. You try it. See what happens. The officer backs off. Later, during the shuttle ride back to the ship, Karis confronts her. He's worried. He saw the fire in her eyes. Not the passionate, hopeful fire of a peacemaker, but the burning embers of someone who's emotionally dead inside. He gently asks if she's okay. Shelleron doesn't answer right away. She stares out the window, eyes unfocused, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Then, in a flat whisper, she says, "I think I've run out." Kara's confused, asks, "Run out of what?" She responds without turning her head. "Cares." This short exchange speaks volumes. It marks the moment when Shelleron finally verbalizes. What's been happening since the Farron mission?
Oh.
Her emotional tank is empty.
Oh.
Not because she doesn't want to care, but because she physically and mentally can't anymore. She has given everything, her compassion, her energy, her peace of mind, to a galaxy that repeatedly refuses to change. Part 2 reveals that Shelleron's internal crisis is no longer just private ites bleeding into her work. She's becoming a different person. Someone who doesn't hesitate, doesn't comfort, doesn't soften the edges. Her behavior is still technically within professional bounds, but there's a quiet intensity to her now that alarms those around her. This chapter also highlights a cruel truth about diplomacy and compassion in war-torn galaxies. Empathy is not an infinite resource. Shelleron, the living embodiment of Terran compassion, is beginning to experience emotional burnout. And once someone like her stops caring, the galaxy loses a stabilizing force. The galaxy asks again, shows us what happens when someone who's always given too much is asked to give. Moran chooses not to. Alran is still doing her job, but the part of her that once believed in redemption and hope is fading. She no longer believes everyone can or should be saved, and that shift changes everything. Part 3. What the Dead Leave Behind from Tales from the Terran Republic. No more cares to spare. By the time the TRV Resolute arrives at Eberthel, Shelleran is no longer the same person who once rushed into chaos with open arms and hopeful words. She's quiet, distant, and cold, not in a malicious way, but in a resigned one. Her emotional reserves are gone. She isn't angry, she's just done. Eberthel is not a war zone. It's not a famine site. It's where it's a tomb, once a shining beacon of interspecies cooperation. Eberthel had been home to a peaceful alliance of 3 civilizations. They built a shared culture, mixed architecture, art, and governance. For decades, the planet had been a living testament to what diplomacy could achieve. Now, it's a smoldering wasteland. The planet fell to a planetary-scale data virus, a sophisticated piece of malicious code that systematically destroyed infrastructure. It turned smart systems against the very people they were meant to serve, shutting down life support, turning water filtration toxic, and crashing orbiting satellites onto civilian populations. The origin of the virus remains unknown. Some suspect pirates, others believe it was a secret weapon deployed by enemies of the Republic. But the reason no longer matters. The damage is done. EBR Ithal is dead. The Resolute's mission isn't to save lives this time. There are no meaningful survivors left. The few that remain are broken, feral, mute, wandering through ruins like ghosts. This time, the crew is sent to recover what remains: cultural artifacts, genetic archives, memory stones, anything that can preserve the identity of the lost civilizations. Shelleran is part of the team again. But her purpose feels different. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't comfort the crew. She moves through the ruins with a kind of detached sorrow, like someone attending a funeral, where she already cried out all her tears. The centerpiece of this chapter is her visit to a collapsed temple. This temple once housed symbols from all 3 Abrithali species statues, murals, and relics honoring unity. But now it's rubble, cracked tiles, dust-covered bones. A once beautiful dome lies shattered on the ground. Lieutenant Karras finds her there, kneeling in front of a broken statue. She's taken off her hazard mask, even though the air is no longer safe to breathe. Karras panics. The air's contaminated. What are you doing? Shelleran doesn't flinch. Her voice is calm. I don't care. It's a small moment, but a powerful one. That simple phrase says it all. Karras tries to reason with her, warning that exposure could be dangerous. But Shelleran isn't being careless out of defiance. She's simply at the point where danger means nothing anymore. It's not because she's reckless, but because there's nothing left in her that's afraid of dying. She has seen so much death, failure, cruelty, that she no longer feels urgency for her own survival. Then she starts talking. She shares a memory. The last time she was on Eberthel, a high priestess told her that she had the soul of a healer, that her compassion would one day save more lives than she would ever know. It was meant as a blessing, a prophetic affirmation of the good she could do in the universe. Now, sitting in the ruins of that prophecy, Shelleran finally speaks a bitter truth. I should have told her the truth. I'm not a healer, just a translator who knows where to stand. This line is central to Shelleran's psychological unraveling. It reveals her deepening self-doubt and the crushing weight of futility. For so long, she believed her empathy could change things, that listening, caring, and being present in the darkest moments mattered. But now, in the ashes of a dead world, she questions if it ever really made a difference at all. Shelleran finishes by whispering something in a dead language, likely a prayer or farewell end, then calmly puts her mask back on. No breakdown, no screaming, just silence, and then she walks away. This chapter marks the emotional death of the Shelleran the crew once knew. Part 1 was the moment she broke. Part 2 was when she admitted it. Part 3 is when she stopped pretending. Altogether, her act of kneeling in the ruins maskless, of mourning silently instead of reacting emotionally, shows just how far she's fallen into apathy. Not because she's cold-hearted, but because she's been overexposed to loss. Too many ruined worlds. Too many dead names. Too many moments where hope did nothing. What the dead leave behind isn't just about ruins and artifacts, about what they leave in the living. In Shelleran's case, the dead leave behind a final realization that the universe is not kind. And sometimes the ones who care the most are the ones it devours first. Part 4. The ones who deserved it, from Tales from the Terran Republic. No more cares to spare. After witnessing death, suffering, and apathy on a galactic scale, Shelleran is no longer the gentle soul she once was. She's not broken in the traditional sense. There's no screaming, no weeping, no rebellion. What's left is something far more dangerous. Clarity born from emotional exhaustion. The part of her that once believed everyone deserved compassion is now silent. And that silence speaks louder than words. The TRV Resolute's next mission takes them to Laraxis Prime. It's a thriving capital world that, unlike the last few missions, isn't in ruins or under attack. Laraxis is intact, technologically advanced, economically strong, and politically stable. But morally, it's rotting. Laraxis Prime has just emerged from a brutal trade war blockade. But instead of protecting its people, the Laraxi elite hoarded resources, letting the population starve and riot while they lived in floating luxury cities above the suffering. The underclass begged for food and medicine, while the ruling class feasted in marble halls and drank crystal-clear wine. The Republic, disturbed by the atrocities, dispatches the Resolute to conduct talks and establish a humanitarian agreement, food shipments, medical aid, and policy reforms. In theory, it's just diplomacy. But Shelleran has seen enough. She walks into the Chancellor's palace with her usual calm, but there's something different about her now. She doesn't smile. She doesn't offer pleasantries. When the Laraxi Chancellor mocks her, calling her the Republic's bleeding heart, she doesn't even blink. "I'm not here to bleed," she says flatly. The Chancellor, smug and condescending, dismisses her. He sees her as weak, just another diplomat playing pretend. After all, what can a single hybrid woman do? But Shelleran is no longer interested in begging tyrants for kindness. Later, she walks through the slums alone, without an escort, without weapons, without fear. She gives away all her emergency rations, not because she's trying to win hearts or make peace, but because it's the bare minimum. She doesn't document it. She doesn't tell anyone. She just does it quietly. Her hands are scraped. And when she returns to the ship, no one questions it. They've learned not to. The real turning point comes the next day. During formal negotiations between the Republic and the Laraxi elite, everyone is their ambassadors, policy officials. Aides, the Chancellor makes another dismissive comment, proud of how he survived the riots. It's clear he feels untouchable. That's when Shelleran finally reaches her limit. She stands up in the middle of the meeting, locks eyes with the Chancellor, and speaks not with diplomatic restraint, but with surgical precision. "You are not worth the air you breathe." The room freezes. No one has ever heard Shelleran speak like that. The Republic crew is stunned. The Laraxi officials are furious. The Chancellor is speechless. And she's not done. For too long, Shelleran says, "I've patched wounds while monsters toast their own cruelty. I've begged tyrants to spare their children while they dine on the last grain of rice. No more." Then she removes her translator badge, the very symbol of her work, and lays it on the table. "You've had my empathy. You've squandered it. You don't get another drop." And with that, she walks out. No apologies. No explanations. Just a quiet exit. This moment is massive, not just for Shelleran, but for the Terran Republic itself. Rebellion. She isn't throwing punches or calling for war. She's simply withdrawing her care. And in doing so, she issues a far more terrifying threat than any weapon. The Republic's compassion is not infinite. Shelleran has become its barometer. For years, she represented everything noble about the Republic: understanding, forgiveness, and mercy. If even she has decided someone is beyond redemption, that sends a clear message. This isn't about a personal grudge. It's about a shift in how the Republic sees its enemies, and more importantly, how its most compassionate citizens have finally lost their patience. The title of this chapter, The Ones Who Deserved It, reflects a truth Shelleran has come to accept. Not everyone deserves empathy. Some people use it as a shield, some use it as a weapon, and some, like the Laraxi elite, have bathed in the blood of the innocent and dared to smile through it all. For Shelleran, this isn't a breakdown, it's a choice. She's no longer trying to save everyone. She's done offering her soul to those who treat kindness as weakness. And with that choice, she becomes something new, a reminder to the galaxy. You had your chance with mercy. Now comes consequence. Part 5. After the cares are gone from Tales from the Terran Republic, no more cares to spare, the final part of the story. After the cares are gone takes place in the quiet aftermath of Shelleran's defining moment, the confrontation on Laraxis. Prime Shelleran has crossed a line, not in violence, but in withdrawal. After walking out of the negotiation room and leaving her translator badge behind, she effectively steps down from the role she was once known for, the ever-compassionate heart of the Terran Republic. Now, she sits in her quarters aboard the TRV Resolute, alone. The tea in her hands is cold. She hasn't touched it. Her eyes aren't focused on the stars, she's just existing. It's not depression in the traditional sense. Rather, it's the deep, hollow quiet that follows after someone has nothing more to give. The galaxy broke. Her faith in diplomacy, what's left is not rage or despair, but a kind of resolved emptiness. Lieutenant Karras, the ship's second in command, and perhaps the only one who truly understands her transformation, comes to check on her. He doesn't barge in or start with concern, like gently, like someone stepping into the room of a sleeping patient. He asks her if she's okay. Her reply is quiet and deliberate. I think I'm done. Kara's uncertain, asks what she means done with what. Her answer is simple, yet cuts to the core of the story's emotional arc, pretending this galaxy can be healed with hugs. This line is more than just bitterness, it's truth-born. From experience, Shelleran has seen it all. Refugees who die begging, tyrants who never answer for their crimes, cultures wiped out while others feast. She spent her life believing that her empathy was powerful enough to make change. But after mission after mission of watching cruelty go unchecked and kindness go unreturned, that belief has withered. Karras, rather than argue, listens. He understands what Shelleran is saying, even if he doesn't fully know what it means for her future. Shelleran clarifies her feelings further, not out of spite, but reflection. I didn't stop caring, she says. I just stopped wasting. This is the true heart of the finale. She, Loran, hasn't become heartless. She hasn't lost her morality. She's simply chosen to stop throwing her compassion into black holes that devour it without change. What the galaxy doesn't realize is that its greatest mistake wasn't in breaking hurt, was in making her stop trying. The rest of the crew senses the shift too. They walk more carefully around her. They speak to her less, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. They're not used to this version of her, this quiet, poised, and unapologetically done version of Shelleran. Karras, however, doesn't see it as the end. Instead, he sees it as the beginning of something else. He tells her, then maybe it's time we stop sending you to beg monsters for crumbs. Maybe it's time they beg us for mercy. That line represents a tonal shift, not just in Shelleran, but in how the Republic might begin responding to the universe. For so long, the Republic relied on compassion as a strategic and moral tool. Shelleran was the model of that ideology, proof that peace was worth pursuing, that enemies could be reasoned with. But now, the galaxy has abused that kindness one time too many. Shelleran doesn't smile at Karras's comment, not with warmth at least. What she gives is something more subtle, a calm, cold acknowledgement that maybe the Republic's days of mercy have ended, not because it wants war, but because its finest peacemakers have run out of compassion to offer. Her final statement is the quiet warning the galaxy should fear.
Ow.
No more poise. No more patience. The Terran Republic has tried kindness.
Ow.
Let them see what we look like when the last care is gone. That's where the story ends. Not with action, not with violence, but with a change in intention. The Republic's most compassionate voice has chosen silence, and that silence is louder than war drums. Part 5 is not a typical resolution. It's a transformation. Shelleran does not return to who she was. She does not pick up her badge, rejoin diplomacy, or reclaim hope. Instead, she evolves. She chooses who deserves her energy, her empathy, and her voice. The girl who once cried in refugee tents now walks, with the certainty of someone who will never beg tyrants again, and that's what the galaxy doesn't understand. They didn't just exhaust a diplomat, they created a reckoning.